Local and national news has been drenched in coverage of the water quality issues plaguing Florida. We're going to find out how that's impacting St. Lucie County next on Inside St. Lucie. Hello and welcome to this edition of Inside St. Lucie, SLC TV's monthly government affairs show. I'm your host, Eric Gill, St. Lucie County's Communications Division Director, and on today's show we're going to talk about the water quality issues and how it impacts St. Lucie County with my guests, St. Lucie County Commissioner Anthony Bana and Brandon Tucker with the Governing Board of the South Florida Water Management District. But before we meet our guests, here's some upcoming events and announcements from the Board of County Commissioners.
Voters will be asked to consider a half-cent increase to the St. Lucie County sales tax on the November 6 election, which would generate $18.5 million annually for better roads, more sidewalks, and cleaner rivers. St. Lucie County and the cities of Fort Pierce and Port St. Lucie encourage residents to learn more about this proposed sales tax increase by attending one of two informational open houses on Wednesday, September 26 from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Haverdale Fenn Center, 2000 Virginia Avenue in Fort Pierce, and Thursday, September 27 from 5 to 8 p.m. at the Port St. Lucie Community Center, 2195 Southeast Oroso Boulevard in Port St. Lucie. If you can't attend either open house, visit slchalfcent.org for more information about the proposed sales tax and a list of projects that it will fund. The second annual Procession of the Species event is back and bigger than before. Mark your calendars for Saturday, October 27th, starting at 10 a.m. in downtown Fort Pierce. Presented by the Oxbow Eco Center, the Bacchus Museum, the St. Lucie Cultural Alliance, and the Indian River Lagoon Science Festival, there'll be lots of events leading up to the big parade, as well as opportunities for you to tap into your spirit animal and make an excellent costume for the procession. This event coincides with the Indian River Lagoon Science Festival, which takes place on the same day, Saturday, October 27th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Veterans Memorial Park, 600 North Indian River Drive in Fort Pierce. For details about the Procession of the Species, visit stlucieprocession.com or call the Oxbow Eco Center at 772-785-5833. Join us in the studio for Covering the Bases with the Mets on the third Monday of each month at noon. Featuring the St. Lucie Chamber of Commerce and the St. Lucie Mets, you can be a part of the live studio audience on the corner of Virginia Avenue and 25th Street and learn more about the important work nonprofits are doing here in St. Lucie County. Coffee with the Chair, hosted by the St. Lucie County Chamber of Commerce, is held on the fourth Friday of each month, starting at 8:30 a.m. in the SLC TV studios of the County Administration Complex in the old Civic Center side, 2300 Virginia Avenue, Fort Pierce. Be sure to stop in for a hot cup of coffee and hear the latest news from the Chamber and the County. A reminder that the Board of County Commissioners meetings are held at 6 p.m. on the first Tuesday and at 9 a.m. on the third Tuesday in the Commission Chambers of the Roger Poitras Administration Annex, 2300 Virginia Avenue, Fort Pierce. The board typically holds an informal meeting on the second Tuesday at 9 a.m. in Conference Room 3.
Now for the latest updates about all St. Lucie County Commission meetings, workshops, and events, be sure to visit our website at stlucieco.gov and click on our comprehensive calendar, or you can be added to our press release distribution list at slctv at stlucieco.org. And you can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're going to take a quick break. Before we do, we're going to check in with the latest economic development stats with another St. Lucie Works.
Bed tax revenue grew significantly compared to last year. St. Lucie County's bed tax collection jumped 9.5% in June of this year compared to 2017. Overall collections for the year continue to outpace all previous years. Overall building activity increased in June by 7.5% compared to May, with 1,081 permits being submitted. Revenue for that time frame was also up, with a total of $293,737. The housing market was both up and down for June. According to the Florida Realtors Association, the average median home sale price in June was nearly $225,000, up 8.7% from last year, while condos decreased in value by 6.3%, with the median price at $159,000. St. Lucie County's unemployment rate rose slightly in June to 5.1% compared to May's 4.9%, but down from last June's 5.4%. Statewide, the unemployment rate fell to 3.7%. There were 2,500 more jobs on the Treasure Coast compared to last year, with the largest gains in leisure and hospitality with 1,300, retail with 800, and education and health services with 400. If you work for a local business looking for skilled or trained labor, be sure to contact the staff at CareerSource as they can assist your company with its recruitment and training needs. And if you're an individual looking for a new job, they can help you as well. Visit the CareerSource online at careersourcerc.com or call 1-855-4U2-HIRE.
My name is Wilberto Ramos. I'm in charge of the final assembly here at Maverick. So everything pivoted on me and my crew in order to complete the boat. So everybody's expecting for us to finish our work on time to meet our goals. When I first started here, back in Lamo, doing lamination. Give me the opportunity to open up doors for myself to move up to a different position and be where I'm at. Back then, I didn't even speak the language. I utilized translator. It was hard at the beginning because I had the language barrier, and also I didn't know the job. But they allow you to learn. I like the challenge. Every day is different. When you see the boat all come together, I get the privilege for that to happen on my department. We start putting all the components on the boat and everything starts taking shape, and you've been one unit. That's one of the biggest rewarding moments. When we put people on boats and had the confidence that you put them and their family on a safe boat, that's, for me, that's very important. Right now, we do have a lot of opportunity. We've grown. We're very demanding. Our product is out there. People like it, love it. We're building a new facility, and there will be a lot of positions out there to be filled.
Welcome back to Inside St. Lucie. I'm your host, Eric Gill, and I'm joined with St. Lucie County Anthony Bonner. Thanks for taking the time to come on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Eric. Water quality is one of the biggest issues facing St. Lucie County right now. It affects our health, our businesses, our tourism, and our quality of life. And that's why I invited Brandon Tucker from the South Florida Water Management District today, and I'd like to thank you for joining us as well.
Yes, sir. Good morning, Commissioner.
Yeah, well, thank you both for coming on. And as as we mentioned, and you just mentioned too at the start of the show, all over not just local news, but national news has been focused on water quality, not just on our coast, but the west coast of Florida as well. And it's kind of an interesting take because the blue-green algae being discharged from the Lake Okeechobee hasn't really hit St. Lucie County yet. I say yet, but we're taping this at the end of August. You never know if that water is going to move north, but it's frustrating because a lot of it is something that St. Lucie County commissioners and even the South Florida Water Management District can't control. Yeah.
Absolutely. This is a multi-government level issue, and we really need to work with the federal and the state government in order to get this done for our community.
Yeah. Let's talk about some of the projects, Mr. Tucker. You've been on South Florida Water Management District governing board for a little over a year now?
Yes, sir. Correct.
And they have, over the recent years, have implemented some projects that obviously can't stop Lake O, but will help with the discharges and storage capacity in the lake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, especially here in St. Lucie County with the 10 Mile Creek project, that was a very well-known project that was originally started by the Army Corps of Engineers, went through about 10 years of litigation and some issues with construction, and then it was turned over to our agency at South Florida Water Management, and for about $6 million, which was a lot less than was ever anticipated. We were able last year to get that 520-acre stormwater treatment area and reservoir online to be able to provide treatment in the 10 Mile Creek Basin. So we've been getting the full benefit partly last wet season, but also this year, which in May of this year was the wettest May in the history of Florida. Yeah. So being able to have that treatment in St. Lucie County in this wet season was very big benefit.
Yeah, and then you go back the last 2 summers, and I wish this was wood because hopefully we can get through another hurricane season without impacts, but we had Matthew and then Irma, and even though Matthew wasn't a direct impact, we still saw a lot of rain, and with Irma, we saw in St. Lucie County 21 inches in the northern part of Lakewood Park area. So, all those have an impact.
Absolutely.
And one of the things too, residents, it's as you said, Commissioner, it's multi-jurisdictional and different agencies, and it's tough for residents. They see this canal in their backyard. Who do they call? Is it South Florida? Is it City of Port St. Lucie? Is it St. Lucie County? Is it the Army Corps? And I wish we had one map that showed all the canals, but unfortunately we don't. We help, we find the address and help direct them to the right place. But
and I think people need to be engaged at all levels, and people need to write their congressman. They need to write their state legislators. They need to call my office as well. And we're certainly carrying the water here at the county commission, and really putting the pressure on the federal and state government where we can, and doing everything we can at the local level.
And we've tried to do that too. We've added the Indian Hills Recreation Area, which is a stormwater project. I think South Florida may have helped with funding on that one, but it was off Savannah Road, and we can increase the capacity of that. As we talked before we started shooting, Florida was essentially a swamp, and we drained it to build houses. And while that was the best method for building homes, it wasn't always the best for water quality. Right, Brandon? A lot of those canals now are just straight shooting stormwater right into the lagoon and St. Lucie rivers.
Yeah, going all the way back into the, probably the late 1800s, and then even when we decided that when we had the flooding in 1947 in the Kissimmee Prairie Basin, and everybody said, it'd be a good idea to straighten the Kissimmee River and make it a canal. And we find out that what seemed to be short-term answers that look like they'll be good resolutions to the problem have unintended consequences that we didn't know about. And so we're working on Kissimmee River restoration now to try to fix that problem and slow the flow down coming into Lake O, which will help the estuaries. So yeah, we always have to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that I've also talked about, and it's not the complete solution, but I think it would help with the problem, is making septic to sewer conversions more palatable for communities like ours. How much of a solution is that?
Yeah, absolutely. We were just down in Monroe County in Marathon for a governing board meeting here several months ago, and we saw the impact of how the septic to sewer conversions have been so successful in Monroe County. And so the immediate benefit that they saw in their canals and their systems down there, and I think that without question, after meeting with officials at Harbor Branch, Dr. LaPointe, getting to meet with them, spend time with them, and understanding the impact of septic tanks in our lagoon, absolutely. Those are solutions that we need to be dealing right now. That's what I call low-hanging fruit solutions, because those are things that we can immediately impact on a local level. When we're waiting for these big state and federal reservoir projects like C-2324 and C-25, those take a very long time, and they cost billions of dollars to get implemented. So when we can be working together with the district, with local municipalities to see septic to sewer conversion, that will absolutely be a benefit to the lagoon.
Yeah, and I remember that talk when Mr. LaPointe, Dr. LaPointe came to the Board of County Commissioners, and he said, number one thing you can do to improve water quality is septic to sewer. Number two is stormwater projects. And the county has tried to do as much as we can, but obviously funding is an issue. It's not billions of dollars, but it's in the millions.
Well, and I want to take a moment to just kind of put a plug in for the half-cent referendum this November, because that's one of the considerations, in addition to improving our roadways, which are in great need of repair. We're currently on a 75-year repaving schedule at the county.
And it should be 15.
Yes. But it's also going to allow us to complete some very important water quality projects. And so as you're considering that half cent, which would be about $50 a year for the average family, and it will be paid by about 20% by our tourists, that's something you want to consider, because it's going to impact a lot of our water quality
Absolutely,
projects.
yeah. We've been going out and meeting with HOAs and homeowners, and the question we get a lot of times is, what happens if the sales tax doesn't pass? And the reality is the infrastructure needs that the county have don't go away. So you, as a commissioner, have to decide: do you either raise the millage rate, or do you cut services and move funds from parks or libraries into some of these road projects? But and we've also gotten some feedback from residents to say, well, you say cleaner rivers, but how are you going to clean up the rivers? But as we talked about too beforehand, these stormwater projects, they do have a benefit of collecting that stormwater, storing it, letting Mother Nature take its course before that water is discharged into the lagoon. And I think, again, I will go back to that example, but, of Indian Hills is a great example. But McCarty Ranch is another one that the city of Port St. Lucie did. They're going to increase their storage capacity there. That'll take a lot of that fresh water or storm water that's coming out, store it, treat it, and then before it gets released into the fresh water. So, and Commissioner, on the sales tax too, another thing that I hear from residents is, we're at 6.5, and this would take us to 7. Well, Indian River County, Okeechobee, and Palm Beach are already all at 7. So it would bring us up to some of the surrounding counties as well.
And one of the things to consider is St. Lucie County does have one of the higher millage rates in the state, and this would allow us, it's either the sales tax, which is partially paid by tourists, or, as you mentioned, very deep cuts, or an increase in the millage. And I definitely don't want to increase the millage.
Sure. Let's talk about the 10 Mile Creek project a little bit if we can, because that was, as you said, a long history with that. I remember when we did the ribbon cutting and everybody was all excited and it was held up in litigation. But that has the capacity to store how much water?
Well, it's a 520 acre project, and I don't recall right. It's about,
Sure.
I think the average depth on that one now is about 4 feet.
That's
so
what, yeah.
if we do some quick math on that, I think that would be about 20,000 acre feet?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, if you're holding 4 feet of water over that footprint of about 520 acres, that's the amount of treatment that you're getting through
Sure.
that system.
And is that system have any additional treatment to it, or is it just storage? Because I know, like the Indian Hills project, we put some vegetative mats on
Yes.
the pond to help
Yeah,
suck
they're-
those nutrients up.
Absolutely, and that's a great point, because anytime you have a reservoir component, either if it's a 4 foot or an 8 foot or a 15-foot reservoir, you need to have a shallow stormwater treatment area, which it does have a small stormwater treatment area that stores about 18 inches of water, has the vegetation in there which strips the phosphorus out of the water, and so that's where you get that big benefit. It's one thing to store, it's
Sure.
another thing to clean the water.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
And that's a thing too with the you always hear the blue-green algae and the guacamole thing, but it's really just too many nutrients in the waterway. It's nitrogen and phosphorus, which we all play a part in, whether it's fertilizing our lawns or overwatering, and I know both the county and South Florida have taken steps to curb that as well.
On the Treasure Coast Regional Planning Council, I recently voted for a ban on the land application of biosolids. So can you talk a little bit about the impact of biosolids?
Yeah, I mean, any time that you're putting down fertilizers of any kind, that you're adding nitrates or phosphorus into the system, and then it rains, it flows off into whatever that ditch or canal is, and then it goes through your county system, and then eventually into our state system, and then eventually it heads out to tide, and it goes into the lagoon. So we have to be doing everything that we can through the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, which they're the lead agency on water quality in the state of Florida. We are actually the flood control entity, but we do a lot of water quality stuff with FDEP. But yeah, absolutely, we have to be conscious of that. We need to be monitoring that and be making sure that we're not sending additional phosphorus and nitrates into the lagoon.
Sure, and then the Board of County Commissioners, along with 2 cities and even Martin County, put in a fertilizer ban for residential folks. So during the summer months, rainy season, we're not just putting extra nutrients in, but you're also wasting money too. There's really no sense to fertilize during the summer months. There are some exceptions, because we hear that for athletic fields and golf courses, but even a lot of those commercial businesses aren't going to waste money fertilizing when they don't need to. At least I hope they would. They got money to burn, we'll take it. But tell us how they do that, and we'll figure that out. But Commissioner, any other? You recently finished the campaign trail. What feedback did you get from folks?
I mean, water quality is absolutely the #1 issue that people are concerned about. And people are very frustrated because this is an issue that's been going on for decades, and they feel as if government has continued to fail them. And I just think that it's very important that the people know that at the county level, state level, South Florida Water Management District, we're very concerned on addressing this issue, and we're doing everything that we can to do that.
Yeah, and it was a problem, and you talked about back in the 40s, it was a problem that wasn't created overnight, so unfortunately it won't get solved overnight.
That's right.
There's a lot, as you said, not just cost, but you got multi-agencies involved, and especially when you talk about land acquisition, and that's a lengthy process.
Well, when you put it in perspective, I always tell people this when I speak, that 2 things. One, the South Florida Water Management District is the 2nd largest flood control agency on the planet, second to the Danish government.
Wow.
And we're in charge of the largest ecosystem restoration project in the world, which is the Everglades Restoration Project. So when we're talking about St. Lucie County right now, but even my board seat runs from St. Lucie County all the way down the East Coast to Monroe County to Key West. And then we cover the entire 16 counties from Orlando south with over 8 million residents. And it is an incredibly complicated system.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it reminds me too, I grew up in North Carolina, and in the mid-90s we had some water quality issues there in eastern North Carolina. And everybody pointed the finger at hog farms because there was a growth of switching tobacco to hog farms. But the irony was, nobody wanted to give up eating bacon. And I think the same thing here in South Florida. Everybody wants to point the finger at sugar, big sugar. But restaurants still serve a lot of sweet tea, or or at least I'm guilty of drinking it. But so I think as individuals, we also have to, as you said, get engaged, get involved, understand the system, and not just vote, but vote with your purse, your pocketbook too. Make sure your dollars in commerce speak for how you want to see the environment. Buy local, shop local, that kind of thing. But know where those dollars are being spent. So as we mentioned, there's federal agencies involved in this, and obviously we hope to get a lot of federal dollars. So how are we doing on that front?
Well, and yeah, absolutely. A large portion of this is the federal. It's probably the biggest part of the problem. So can you talk a little bit about some of the federal funding that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and beyond just being a governing board member, I also serve as a facilitator for what's called our Water Resources Analysis Coalition, and that's part of the South Florida Ecosystem Restoration Task Force. There's a lot of layers to this, and we just had meetings in Washington, D.C., and I had an exchange with the Assistant Secretary of the Army about our federal funding. And I said, I appreciate the $107 million that you're giving us this year, but we're supposed to get $200 million a year. It's supposed to be a 50-50 cost share program, $200 million from the state, $200 million from the federal government. But today, as we sit here, the federal government is $1 billion with a B dollars behind the state of Florida, going back to the year 2000. And this the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Project, was supposed to be completed by 2030.
Yeah.
And we have what's called the integrated delivery schedule of all these projects, like C-2324, 25, these other C-44 in Martin County. And with the way funding is going, and that funding is shrinking, the Assistant Secretary of the Army said to me, Brandon, he goes, this is one of the biggest federal budgets I've ever seen, and you better make hay while the sun shines.
Yeah.
Well, if the sun is shining and we're only getting half the money we should be getting, and that's going to shrink, that's a problem for me as a governing board member.
Yeah.
And I think our residents here should be concerned about that. So when the federal government is that far behind, I'm hoping that President Trump will step up to the plate, that he will mend that and bridge that gap, and get that funding coming in so that we can complete the Herbert Hoover Dike restoration. We can complete the reservoir projects north, south, east, and west of Lake Okeechobee. But we need to be working together. Commissioner Bonner, myself, our local legislative delegations, our federal delegation, we need to be camping out on Washington, D.C. and telling them, send us the money, because if we don't get those dollars, we're going to have to find other solutions to be able to take care of this on our own.
Sure. And then the other solution, like the Commissioner mentioned, it would be raise taxes locally, because South Florida Water Management District is also a line item and a tax on your tax bill, and
That's where
the
tax
trim
authority.
notices come out. So, and you guys have held the line, right? this
We
year?
have not raised taxes in 8 years, I believe.
Yeah. In fact,
So-
you guys even had some massive cuts a couple years ago.
Well, back in 2011, I believe, when the economy was tanking and the governor was doing everything he could do to make sure we're fiscally sound, there were some large cuts. But what people don't, I think, understand, and the media hasn't relayed very well, is even though there were big cuts to our agency that went back to about $570 million at that time, our budget is now back up to about $830 million in the budget that we're currently talking about. And we've been able to do that without raising your taxes.
Sure.
So we have increased our funding quite a bit, and it continues to increase as our economy has grown better and done better over time. So yeah, things are looking bright on that end.
Yeah. And Commissioner, the same has kind of happened at the county level. We haven't really. 2 years ago, we lowered the millage rate. Last year there was a slight increase, but this year we're holding the line. But actually, the county's operating budget is $25 million, I think, less than what it was last year.
It's we are collecting, I believe, $6 million less than we were collecting in 2008.
Yeah. So over that time frame, but the population since 2008 has gone up quite a bit. The demand for services, as you said too. That's where that half-cent sales tax, our tourism numbers are through the roof, and people will say, well, why don't you use the bed tax money to do water quality projects? But
well, we can't because it's specified use. But and another thing, we're collecting $6 million less, but our security costs have increased. We've increased the sheriff's budget by $25 million, which was necessary, to make sure that our law enforcement is competitively compensated and that our schools are safe.
Sure.
So we are doing more with less right now.
Yeah, and it's like you said, it comes down to figuring out where you shift those resources, and do you cut back on libraries, because in 2010 we went to libraries went to 2 or 3 days a week instead of 6 or 7. Now we're finally getting them all back to 6 days a week, and I've had people say, well, nobody uses the libraries, but you'd be surprised. This year the summer reading program for students went from about 3,000 participants to a little over 5,000. So,
well, and just my take. I'm one of 5 commissioners, but it's important that we hold the line on the millage, but it's also important that the residents rally behind this half-cent initiative, which passed the City Council of Port St. Lucie unanimously. City Commission in Fort Pierce was unanimously behind it. The Village of St. Lucie's unanimously behind it, and the County Commission was unanimously behind it.
Because it would generate about $18.5 million, and those funds would be split not just for the Board of County Commissioners, but the two cities and the village would get some of that funding as well.
Yeah, for the county, about $108 million over 10 years.
Yeah, and I think that's a conservative number, because if you go back, and this figure always amazes me, you know, in the mid-90s, the voters of this county approved the environmental lands bond, and it was to tax themselves to buy environmental lands, and it was a $20 million bond. It was a tax for 20 years, but we took that $20 million and we matched it with state and federal grants and spent $76 million and bought $76 million worth of land. That has, you know, again, helped with water quality issues, because these are natural wetlands and preserves that filter out those nutrients, and also they're awesome for passive recreation. I love going out on a Sunday. Not this time of year; it's a little too warm. Although I got some really good pictures after I dropped my son off to school. It was still, you know, 7:30 in the morning, and sun was coming over for DJ Wilcox in the Indian River Lagoon, and it was very picturesque. But in the afternoons in the summer, it's either raining or it's hot.
Yeah.
But Commissioner, is there anything else we want to mention before we wrap up the show?
Just, I want to thank Brandon for coming by,
Yes, sir, my pleasure.
and I just want the residents of St. Lucie County to know that we're all united, and just stay active, stay involved. Call your congressman, call your senator's office, and feel free to call my office anytime.
All right, Brent, thanks so much for coming
Yes,
on the
sir.
show.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right,
Yes, sir.
Commissioner.
Thank you.
Don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break. Before we do, we're going to check in with some utility expansions in the northern part of the county.
St. Lucie County's utilities district continues to expand. Thanks to a new public-private partnership with Indrio and 95 Development LLC, the county's water and wastewater lines are being extended from Emerson Road along Indrio Road toward Interstate 95. This expansion will help both commercial and residential growth in the award-winning towns, villages, and countryside planning area. Indrio and I-95 Development LLC has agreed to front the $2.5 million cost to extend the water and sewer lines from Emerson Road to I-95 along Indrio Road, because it was more cost-effective to initiate this project while the state is currently expanding the roadway. The private developer needs a 12-inch water main and a 10-inch forced sewer main to serve its property for future growth, but Indrio and I-95 Development agreed to fund the 12,000-foot expansion of oversized lines to provide sufficient capacity for future development along Indrio Road and not just their own property. In return for paying for the larger utility lines, Indrio and I-95 Development will be reimbursed 19.4% of the cost, not to exceed $724,500, which will be paid in phases as the construction is completed. In the future, when new development connects to these lines and pays the county's connection fees, St. Lucie County and the development company will split the connection fees in proportion to the amounts that's each paid toward the construction of the lines. This agreement will end after 10 years or once Indrio and I-95 Development has been fully reimbursed for the expansion. At that point, St. Lucie County will keep 100% of the future connection fees. The project began in April of this year and is expected to be completed this fall, with Felix & Associates serving as a general contractor and Culpeper Interpreting providing engineering services. Roughly a decade ago, St. Lucie County was concerned about the future growth of the agricultural and undeveloped land along Indrio Road, so the planning staff developed the Towns, Villages, and Countryside Special Planning Area, which has the potential for nearly 38,000 dwelling units, 5 million square feet of commercial and retail space, and 464 acres of industrial land. However, over the years, developers have pointed to the absence of water and wastewater utilities as the reason for the lack of development. And now, thanks to this public-private partnership, St. Lucie County expects to see plenty of economic opportunity along the Indrio Road area.
We hope you've enjoyed this edition of Inside St. Lucie, and we hope you'll tune in again next month. If you have topics or subjects you'd like to see covered here on the program relating to St. Lucie County government, give us a call at 772-462-1791 or send us an email at slctv@stlucieco.org. And if you'd like to see previously aired episodes of this or other SLC TV programs, visit our YouTube page at youtube.com/stluciegov. I'm your host, Eric Gill, and for myself and the staff, thanks for watching.